And welcome back to part two. Zach, let them know who we got with us.
Welcome back for part two. Like Nathan said, we have with us my mom, Jerry Mason, continuing her testimony this week. Um, where we left off was my mom had just talked about her side of losing my sister, and I know said you felt like the Holy Spirit was with you the entire time. And going into my view of it was very, very dark. There's a lot of anger and rage. But looking back at it now, I see it more as a wake up call, kind of, because at that time in my life, I was not living for Christ. I was kind of in the wrong group of friends. I mean, we weren't necessarily going out and drinking and partying and doing anything illegal or anything like that,
What
but
them bad youngins do.
but I was, excuse me, stuck at a dead end job, kind of just woe is me at the time, working third shift. Didn't really have a social life or anything like that other than a select few friends, and they weren't the greatest influence. So at the time, it sucked. I mean, I spiraled pretty hard. I think right at the beginning, I tried to hold it all together for my mom and my dad and everybody else, but I felt like I had to be the strong one, I guess. And seeing my dad cry for like I think the second time in my life kind of messed me up there for a little bit. So I felt like I had to be, the strong one and stuff like that. Uh, but yeah, I looking back now, it was definitely a wake up call to be like, all right, hey, you need to lean on me, lean on Christ more. So
And not to cut away from Zach, but could you see that stuff through Zach at that point, or were you still going through building blocks of your own? Because I think that's important too. Is people, it's so easy for, like we say, people to say, we know it's not going to be easy, um, but we're here for you. And, it's easy to say that part of it.
Right, right.
To go through it and then to not only have a daughter but a son who he's living with you as well, so you're seeing this stuff affect him. Could you see that, or was it you were still going through so many of those trial by fires yourself, you hadn't really noticed it yet, and he had kind of come back around by that time that you began healing as well?
I think I saw it. It's one of those things that I think in our personal dynamic, Zach was living back at home again when it happened. And of course, we saw him all the time. And my husband was not obviously Afton's biological father. Um, so in our household, the four people who were there were my stepson, Zach, my husband, and then of course myself. And so this is going to sound weird, but I carried her. You know what I mean? Like I had her, I birthed her, and so I think out of the three of them, and them all being boys, or men, um, the priority was put on me. You know what I mean? Like the focus was put on my comfort and trying to make sure that my needs were being met and allowing me to grieve however I needed to grieve. Um, there wasn't a lot of emphasis, and I don't think it was intentional, but put on like how Zach was grieving or how my husband was grieving or how, their stepbrother was grieving. And so that wasn't really a good thing. While I was able to navigate the process easily is not the right word, without any hindrance, I guess is probably the better way to say it, because it wasn't an easy process. Um, the boys of our household, unfortunately, kind of stuffed, I think, things down. I think my husband Bob did that. I know Zach did that. And so there was that moment when I started getting a little more clarity just on what was happening around me, that it became more apparent that out of the three of them, Zach was definitely struggling the most. He went from being a very socially active kid. Well, he wasn't a kid at the time, but
I was what 23,
23,
24.
so he's still a kid in my mind, but you know, an active young adult to you know, like,
Going to work and coming home, and that was pretty
yeah,
much it.
and even
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, maybe calling in more than he ever did before, and even what church he attendance he was having with friends or whatever, you know, like that slowed down. And then the next thing, it was like he was sleeping for 10 hours, and then it was 12 hours, and then next thing you know, it's like we haven't seen him in 2 days, and but his car's there, his truck is in the yard, or I guess you had a car actually at that time, or no,
No, I
I
still had
guess
the
you
truck
had a
at that
truck,
time. Yeah,
yeah.
I still had the
But
truck.
you know, like his truck is outside, but
Ford Ranger.
yeah,
F-150.
yeah.
Yeah, close,
So,
close.
but you know, we hadn't seen him, and so then that's when, um, you know, we as a whole started like getting a bit concerned, and unfortunately, it, what even what we attempted to do didn't have a lot of impact on really pulling him out of things, and it really wasn't until he made the decision to go to.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
Not to cut you off,
Oh,
but I
sure.
think what your guys' final attempt was before I decided to go down to Nashville was
Mhm.
getting Max.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's what started pulling me out
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
phone
I got him a
close.
dog. I
Yeah,
just,
because
yeah.
all my life I felt like I had to protect Afton. You know, like I said on my testimony, if you guys go back and watch it, that always felt like I had to be the protector growing up and uh, watching over Afton. You know, if someone picked on her, they had to go through me first. So losing that aspect of it to now, you know, I don't have anybody to protect, and then getting Max, I think that that hole got filled. That I had
Yeah.
something or someone to take care of now.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of pulled me out of that downward spiral. And
And God can use a dog. God can use a
Oh
dog.
yeah, and that's what
Yeah.
I told Zach whenever he was giving his testimony. It was no, that's not. I think God. That's Murphy was for us. We were at a point in our life where we were ready for that next step, and it's not a child. It's not something. It's like we spoke earlier on the part one. Was sometimes we spiritually think we're ready for the moon. We're ready for that battle of ages, and we're just not. We're not ready for it at that time, and so the dog, and that is an interesting. It's interesting that you bring that up because what was the mindset behind Max? What was it? Just
My kids had always been animal lovers, and even Afton maybe more than
oh yeah,
Zach.
100%
Like
growing up, yeah.
we just couldn't have enough animals. Afton was always dragging something home, or you know, we were rescuing strays, and we'd actually had a little Dotson before, a little black Max Dotson before,
Yeah,
and
Max Part 1, the OG, yeah.
I just happened to be scrolling through Facebook, and a gal that I knew had a little Dotson mix, and they wanted to get rid of it. And, you know, I'm one of those too. I love animals too, and I get them, and then I regret them afterwards because they're a lot of work. And I thought, you know, it might just make him feel better. It was still a couple months before his birthday, but I thought, let's just kind of play that whole thing together. And that way he won't necessarily know that I'm trying to give him something to maybe, you know, cheer him up a little. We'll just say it's an early birthday present.
Yeah, that didn't click until I got down to
Yeah.
Nashville.
Yeah.
That was
Never
all.
realized that poor little Max would be such a tool to, like, actually, you know, didn't realize just how big an impact it could actually make. Um, but he ended up being probably the best or not zero purchase I ever made.
well, and that's the thing too is you look at that and Max being a Datsun, Datsuns can be expensive. So you have a mindset as well of we're not seeing Zach for days. There's a good chance we're going to end up taking care of this dog, right? Like that's a thought that probably went through
Sure.
your mind as well. So that calls personal sacrifice. And so sometimes we're pulled out of the pit and we're asked to remind those around us of how you can be pulled out. And sometimes that takes personal sacrifice. And now there's a lot of times where you can make attempt and make attempt. And I'm not saying continue to do that because there's a certain point where you can only do so much. But the fact that you went out and you said, okay, I know there's probably a chance that we might be taking care of this, but I think A, it's free, B, I think it's, or, Zach needs it, A, and B, it's free. So, regardless of how this comes out, and that's the mindset we have to have towards God. Regardless of how this comes out, we know something's getting taken care of here, and it's going to be us. And it's so to see Max and what he is now, and Woody's that's my boy Woody. I love Woody, but to realize that Max is still around, and I get to see evidence of that blessing. We talk about in life Jesus, healing and seeing miracles and stuff like that. To hear that story and to see Max, you don't realize we get to see those. We may not see a physical form of Jesus performing them, but that's the cool part is we don't physically see it, but it still happens. And so now I physically get to see evidence of what helped bring Zach out of the mire, whether it was a dog or not. However, people want to say that, which I believe, like you said, God can do that through a dog. But so you see Zach kind of getting better with Max, and then you made the comment about, and we've talked about his testimony as well, going down to Nashville. Was it Nashville, correct?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
Nashville.
So you see him sort of, okay, he's taking a leap of faith. He's kind of going out on a whim. We're talking about used to sleep 10 hours. Now he's going up and going away from this, getting out and saying, I understand it's away from family, but at the same time, it's not like family was really on his mind at the time. It was he needed something different. So you see him wings and he flies away. Did you see this as this is what he needs at this time, or was this a moment of I don't know what's going on, but I know it's for the better? What was your mindset at the time? Were you firm in okay, this is exactly what he needs, or was it that oh Lord, I don't know what's going on here, but
I think it was a little bit of both, not to cut you off, but
Yeah, I probably sort of thought, okay, fine, he might need this. But honest, he'd never been away from me, and even though he was 23 years old,
not further than,
around the
500
corner,
feet. Yeah.
because even when he moved out after high school, he moved around the corner, and I could see his house from my front porch, and
I could take a rock from my backyard, throw it, and hit
yeah,
her
so
house. Yeah.
I don't really even count that as that he moved out because I still took him groceries and all those kind of things. So when he made the decision to go to Nashville, um,
And just for reference, where I was living, it wasn't necessarily in Nashville. It was Spring Hill, so it was a small town about an hour south of Nashville. So it was about 8 hours one way from Ava to Spring Hill.
I don't know. I wasn't super happy with the idea, and mainly because
and one thing I'd like to add
yeah,
too for those listening, just
right,
because the more that we can highlight in a story, the more people can relate to stuff. You love your husband at the time. He has a child, so you have a stepchild
right,
in this too. So if you are going to be biblical, you are going to respect your husband. What does respect your husband entail? Respecting what he respects, his child. So it's not like it's just, oh, okay, all kids are grown up and well. You still have a stepchild. You
right,
still have, and whether, I think that's important as well. I think society made it a point to where a stepchild is a stepchild. Okay, yeah, that's part, and it's a kid, and you can love it, but it's not your child. So if you're going to respect your husband, that's your child as well. You're making sure that your husband is pleased with his child as well. So you have that on your mind too. And I know that may not at the time sound like something, but that is another thing in life. That life is there. You have another child that is going to be on your radar at some point, at some time.
sure.
It's your husband's child, so he's going to mention it, bring it up. So that is there as well. And on top of that, sorry to cut you off, but you just made the comment you weren't pleased with the idea.
Right. Yeah, I think primarily, number one, he'd never been away from me, and then number two, he was going to live with his dad. And at the time, um, or prior to Afton's death, I do think his dad has gone through a major change too, as a result of Afton's passing. But prior to Afton's death, his dad would not necessarily be, in my opinion, like living the life that I would want Zach to necessarily implement or to necessarily be there full time. Not that he was doing anything wrong. He's remarried. They had a child, and but their faith just didn't necessarily line up the way that I would have liked it to at the time. So I wasn't sure whether or not he was truly gonna be fed the way he needed to be fed. There, I did know that he needed to stop being in our town so that every corner he turned, he saw his sister, or saw us someplace they had been, or, all the memories I think
Yeah.
were haunting him. So I knew he needed to get away from that. It wasn't necessarily where I wanted him to go, but it was the most obvious place to go. Um, and it ended up turning out for the better, you know.
And
And
that's something that's cool too is, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but just to highlight the fact that you knew it was the best play out of all the
Yeah,
places to go. This was something.
sure.
This was a vessel that God had for Zach. It may not be the best, but it's better than the bars. It's better than,
Yeah.
like you said, seeing his sister at every corner, because you know there's going to be a point where he can turn things around. God turns things around, but it's not here. It's not right here at this moment. So you were able to let go of your pride and say, I need to keep him here because he's mine. And I know that I can feed him. And you were like, nope, I need to let go of that. God's going to feed him. So, God, whatever you've got planned for him. And so I would like to ask Zach, at your point in time, we talked about your testimony at this point in time. It was something that excited you because it was a change. You made
right,
the comment as well. You had come to the terms with the fact, I need a change.
right.
I need something. We got to steer the boat in a different direction here. Was your in your mind at this time, just to refresh for those that are listening, was it, oh man, I'm leaving family behind, or was it, this is a new, this is a new?
A little bit of both. I think personally I was a little afraid for my mom because I didn't, not that she didn't have Bob and Jeremiah and stuff like that, but it was, I still felt like I partially needed to be strong for both my mom and my dad. But at the same time, I knew something for me had to change because, you know, at that point, Ava didn't have anything for me at all anymore. And I just needed to get away and clear my mind and figure out not only what I wanted to do, but, whose I was, stuff like that. And I didn't necessarily put God in the forefront of every decision I made while I was down there in Nashville. But looking back, I think God used me to plant a seed in my dad, and he has now, come to Christ and has a deeper relationship with God and everybody that he comes in contact with than he ever had before. So I've seen that come through
I think,
the passing of Afton and then me
yeah, I
moving
think
down there.
the piece maybe that's missing that we haven't said, is when Afton passed, um, even though I had already experienced that moment, that we talked about in the first part, about really coming to recognize not only God's grace for us, the full meaning of what He did at the cross, and just His mercies in our situations and what have you. I still was back and forth. I was being kind of wishy washy with a lot of things. Um, and even Bob and I were struggling somewhat to like find our place, like where God wanted us. And we obviously were attending church, um, but even that had become kind of a struggle. We had left our previous church. We were looking for a new church home, um, listening to ministry on TV, but like we just weren't 100% sold out like what we had been in the past. Um, we'd gotten complacent. Um, just things that happen. I think even in your Christian walk, that can so easily you just let life like crowd God out is basically what happens. And when Afton passed, it became like my relationship with God, just like Zach's relationship with God and her dad's relationship with God, became something new and something different. And Afton probably truly saved all three of our lives by passing. Her death, if it didn't do anything else, and we know it did a lot for other people as well, but her passing truly did save the three of us. Because I no longer could tolerate that back and forth. I no longer could tolerate not being sold out completely for God. I no longer wanted to live in that halfway situation. And the main reason for that, and I can't speak for Zach or for her dad, but the main reason for that is I knew where my daughter was, and there was no way I wanted to ever spend eternity not in the same place. And the only way that I knew that I would see her again, because it was completely evident by her dorm room, by the scripture she had marked when we went to pick up our things on campus, after she passed away, that her relationship with God was where it was supposed to be. So we knew she was in heaven. We knew she went home to be with the Lord. And that's, as a mom, that's what you want. You want to know that there's going to come that day when you see
Your
them
kid won the
again.
game.
Yeah, you just know. And so nothing in my life will ever be more important than 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 that conclusion. So nothing that has happened since, nothing that could happen, will deter me from giving up my relationship with God or walking that willy-nilly kind of journey, because my daughter is with him. And so where do I want to be? I want to be with her again one day. I want to be able to hold her and hug her, and to hear note, because she was such a storyteller, to hear the 4,000 stories that she's going to tell us about heaven and the people she's met and just all the things that I believe heaven is. And if I'm not sold out for Christ and I'm not, living the life that he has for me, that could not happen. And not that we lose our salvation so easily, but you know what I mean? Like my dad, you can allow circumstance to totally derail you. And so, it just became that I just won't ever be willing for it to allow that to happen, as a result. So some people might think it's crazy, but she saved my life. And I think she saved Zach's, and I think she saved her father's. And so had she not passed away, I don't know. Would we have still been wishy-washy, and would we not have found our new home church, my husband and I, and would Zach have gotten his life together? I don't know. Would he have met his wife, Caitlin, and would he be living the life that he's now living, blessed and fruitful and being able to be a part of this ministry and all the things that God has provided since then? I don't know.
And
I can honestly say it probably would have been no, because I felt like I was fine until she passed away. I mean, okay, cool, I'm working third shift, stuck working third shift because I messed up, but that's the price to pay when you do stupid things. You play stupid things, you win stupid prizes. But I didn't see a problem with it until, that clicked. And unfortunately, it was her passing to where, I got that wake up call. And I think for my mom, it took, a year and a half for it to, finally start being okay. For me, it was a little bit longer, to where when I moved back and started talking to Caitlin, that's when my faith started coming back in the foreground and getting better with Christ. So,
well, and I like what the comment that you made about um it sounds odd to say, but had she not, it saved them. And I think that there's such a gospel to that whenever you talk about scripture. I've made the comment before about I was a person who was afraid of consequences. Therefore, I needed the hellfire and brimstone when I was a kid,
Sure.
because if I didn't have that, I'd be out partying right now or drugged out or something. So you made the comment, and I just think it's important to highlight that is um, that's a blessing for you to be able to see as well, that it kept people alive and she also helped save. And so, like we made the comment, your daughter won. She accomplished what we all seek to do. The Lord was like, "You're good. I appreciate everything. She's now safe. She's now, you don't have to worry about her." I just want to bring a light to, like you said, Zach and the fruits. We talk about what Zach and Caitlin do for the young adults ministry and how important that is, because young adult is kind of like a 16, 15, 14-year old. They're feeling the waters out. They've been burnt. They don't know. It's an awkward thing. So I think a young adult is an important time to get ministry, to get that feeling of, hey, we're not weirdos. We're not Bible thumpers. We're here just like Jesus was, to let you know we need to stick together. We need each other. And so sometimes, like you said, you have to let go. We'll talk now about the next step in life. And so Zach is wearing pink for a reason. Pink, as we mentioned, we talked about purple earlier. Pink is breast cancer awareness. There are a lot of things that we don't celebrate, we honor and in remembrance of, is pink for breast cancer. And so we'll talk about that portion of your life, because there are people now with an illness, a sickness, a disease, whatever the case may be. And there is that two roads you can go down. You can go down, I'm going to listen to what everybody says, or I'm just going to trust in wherever God's got me for this thing, and He's going to bring me out of it. What's the time frame between the death and getting over that to the news that you have breast cancer?
Um, Not a lot of time. Afton passed away in 2015, and obviously that kind of stirred things up in our home for quite a while. And I just want to be clear too, just for other moms and stuff too. You never get over it. So even though when you get to that place, whether it would have been a year and a half or a couple of years, where it's just more to the point where you get to the point where you can breathe again. And
That's why
yeah,
I refer to the ball in the box analogy a lot, to where when it very first happens, you got a button inside of a box and there's a huge ball in it, and it hits that button over and over and over, and you feel that pain constantly. But over time, that box never changes and that button never goes away, but the ball gets smaller. So you kind of just learn how to deal with it. Not
and
that
I
when that
think
button doesn't
yeah.
get pressed, it still doesn't hurt, and those memories don't come flooding in. It just, those days are fewer and farther in between.
I think we just get really good at managing it better. I think that's what most people accomplish. But just to kind of set up things a little bit better too. So Avnan unfortunately passed away in 2015, and we were navigating that process. Everybody was having, like everyone will, a different grieving pattern and a different grieving journey. After I was sad, I got angry. And at that point, then our stepson was acting up in school. And that was hard because I had a daughter who wasn't here anymore, who worked hard and wanted to live life to the fullest. And I had a teenage boy who didn't want to do anything, didn't want to attend school. In 20,
Yeah, she worked 2 full-time jobs, 80 hours a week, and still maintained a 4.0.
So, that was a little hard to navigate. And so then in 2017 is when, like I mentioned in part one, my husband had an on the job accident and became disabled and lost his job of 17 years. He was the primary breadwinner. And so, that was really difficult. So we were navigating that for a couple of years. In the process, I worked for the local health department as WIC coordinator, which is a program for moms and babies and children. And Afton and I had always wanted to open up a boutique. And so we started that process and we opened up Blondie's and Ava. And so I was working 2 jobs. And probably actually in about 2018, I found a bump, and I was just too busy. I was too busy opening the store, working my other job, taking care of this stepchild every other week. Obviously, being married, and you've got obligations to your husband. Zach, still at that point had just kind of made his decision to go to Tennessee. We're navigating financial issues and so forth, and so it was too much, and you know what I mean. It was like, we'll just deal with this later. And finally, in 2019, it had gotten bigger. It had not gone away. And so I finally went for a mammogram. Had missed, it had been 2 years since I had my annual because I was too busy to do that too. And unfortunately, at this point, finally went after I left the health department and no longer had insurance. So, not such a good choice because obviously, if something was found, at the time I didn't have any insurance to take care of it. But there is this fabulous program in the state of Missouri that will actually pay for you to have a breast exam by your local doctor. And then if they find anything, they'll pay for your mammogram and the treatment and stuff that follows. So even though I was trying to pursue this dream that Afton and I had of her coming home and opening up a store so that she could work retail like what she had trained at school and use her business degree, I had let go of my full-time job, which was my stability and my insurance, and now I'm faced with this situation. But my doctor, excuse me, had taken care of my breast exam through this Missouri program. It's called Show Me Healthy Women, and she obviously felt the same thing that I had felt, and so they sent me on for the mammogram. And unfortunately, if you end up at the mammogram office for very long at the breast care clinic and they pull you back for a second look, that usually means that it's not good. So they ended up doing an ultrasound that day, double checking things, and you could see just on the face, I'm sure it's hard every day to hide that every time you see something. And they're looking, and then they looked again. They did an ultrasound, and I'm like, okay, is it bad? And they're like, well, we're concerned. And I finally just asked the doctor, I'm like, okay, so like, just shoot it to me straight. Like, is it worrisome for cancer? And she said, yes. And so then at that point, they scheduled for a biopsy to confirm it. It ended up being like a week or so later. So between Afton's passing and when all this happened was about 4 years, which had been pretty packed full of some, crazy, stressful moments. And so they did a biopsy and confirmed. Fortunately for me, it was only stage 2. So even though I had waited almost a year to have it looked at, it was a slow growing cancer. And so we were able to get set up for surgery. And then I did 24 rounds of radiation. And the good thing is I'm in remission and have been ever since. But, God, I think, used that time again. I keep saying every time I try to get a little too in control of my situation and I don't give him all the control, he allows something to kind of come in to kind of pull me back into the right place. And so I don't know if breast cancer was that or not, but what did end up happening as a result of my breast cancer is that insurance and that program was put into place for my care. And here we are. And something that I've always believed in is tithing. And even when things got really tough for us and my husband lost his job and our income changed drastically, we still gave that 10%, and we still gave offerings and whenever we felt like God was leading us to. And he makes a way. When we're faithful, he makes a way. And so even though here we were faced with breast cancer, my husband doesn't have a job anymore. We were only living on the, the profits of the store at this point, and it was flourishing. God was blessing it. I had absolutely no insurance, but my doctor being wise and setting it up so that my breast exam could be done by that program, then qualified me to have that insurance for the remainder of my treatment. So that insurance paid for all of my breast care, paid for my surgery, paid for all my radiation treatments. And then when, and not to jump too fast, but then when I got COVID just right after radiation and my kidneys started failing, that insurance was also there to help start paying for my kidney failure treatment. So it probably sounds crazy. Getting breast cancer actually, again, just like Afton's death has saved my life, because I am in renal failure right now. I do dialysis twice a week. I am working on getting it on the kidney transplant list, which hopefully will be soon. But it, it's just crazy that he has used what could have been and was a hard thing to go through. Radiation wasn't easy, but he used that situation to help ensure a blessing and set it up so that now I'm fully covered with insurance. Of course, now I got Medicare, which makes me sound like I'm a crazy old person. But
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 it's
he has put all those things into place, and I believe it's him because things just don't happen that way.
well, and it's important too that you make it known that it was something God made the most out of the situation you chose.
Right.
We know blessings sometimes as a job. We don't look at insurance and we don't look at stuff like that. Yeah, it stinks that you're there sometimes and it's not a fun place, but God's like, hey, there's not a lot of places paying
Yeah.
this. And I'm not saying that you should stick to the mindset of this is where God's got me for the rest of my life, because I
Sure.
think you should be ready for at any point in time to pick you up and take you out of
Right.
Egypt. You should be ready for that. But I think you have to also look at these things as blessings. And it's like, okay, working late nights, I know for me, working late nights was a saving grace for me, because when I got off work, I was ready to go to bed. If not, I was in a younger time in I would have been out doing my own thing at that time of night. So God blessed me, and it wasn't fun. He had to yank on that tooth. He had to get it out of there. But like you made the comment, unfortunately, he had to slow you down. And he did the best with what situation you had created. And like you said, the shop was flourishing, so he's still showing you little bits of blessings in what you have chosen, and so that's just another thing that I know this is an odd time to do this, but make kind of a cut into base camp. Men have that issue. For those men that are listening, for you being able to have a son and to see how his father is, your husband now, so you can kind of testify as to that side of the story. And I like to get both sides of stories because each side has their own eyes that they see things through. So talking about understanding these things, how much support do you get from men? Because I think we can we've got Flourish, which is our women's group, which they're very close. But if you're not in that church environment, if you're not close to people that you don't have that comfort and you isolate yourself, which is what we can do. How important is it for couples to maintain? Because you're talking about a lot of stuff fast for a marriage that it's important that we look at. We've been talking about in youth, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. That's not the ideal situation, right? Joseph's really not the dad. Mary's young. She's done this out of wedlock. So this really isn't that cool looking in the world's eyes. If you're playing cards, that's not the hand you're wanting to be dealt.
Sure.
So, as somebody who has gone through this stuff, what is it like for us men, your side of the story? What support did you need, did you get, or did you need and not get in that? And what advice you would give us for when our wives are going through these situations, these toughnesses, we as men can sacrifice our time to you. We can sacrifice. We may not be rich. We may not have all the money to take you to fancy dinners to help you get your mind off of cancer. That's sometimes we don't have that. As somebody who you know has gone through this, give us men some advice of what you could have got and didn't get, or what you did get and you needed at the right time from your husband, your
Yeah.
spouse.
Um, I'm fortunate because I really do have a really good husband. Um,
He's all right.
yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
I'm not gonna call him dad.
I'm gonna say he's not here, so we can say whatever we want, right? Um, the thing is, he's your average fella. He's a guy's guy. Has worked hard his entire lifetime. All the way back to even when he was a kid. His work ethic is insane. Um, he's a sacrificer, and I don't necessarily think um, that most men fall into that category. Um, our dynamic is probably a little bit different in the sense that because of what has happened, um, we got married in 2012, and so by 2015, that's not very long. Even though we had the normal, like beginning of any kind of like blended family, kids getting to know each other. We bought a house, all those kind of things. 2015, then we're losing a child, and he had grown to love Afton, tremendously. So it was a loss for him. So he was wounded and grieving, and then I think something to keep in mind is then in 2017 he lost his job, and he was no longer able to do the things that he was meant to do. um, but then we're struggling with all these extra things and all this physical um, illness and stuff for me, and a lot of times that puts me in a place where I'm not able to do some of the things that I've done in the past. And um, he does laundry and he's not afraid to do dishes, and um, that was not the dynamic in the beginning. I did the laundry and kept the house clean and made sure all the dishes were done, and cooked, every night. And because our lives have changed so drastically, the dynamic of that has changed. And so he's taken on some of those roles because I haven't been able to, or because on dialysis day, it, I'm in bed a lot after treatment, and those things. And I do think that's really important. I think that men, as a whole, um, just I think need to come to the realization that there's really nothing that changes who they are, or how strong they are, or even how manly they are. But so often as women, we need to see them step out and take on some of those roles that maybe traditionally are more ours when we are in those situations where we really need it. And I think what makes and breaks marriages is when those kind of circumstances come, um, whether or not there's no longer like this. And I know we're so worried about identity these days. It doesn't change that you're a man, it doesn't change that I'm a woman, but just being able to interchange the duties of the household, I guess, is the thing. But then, too, just being able to be sensitive and quiet and or strong when your partner is suffering through cancer, or a loss of a child, or a new diagnosis that is time consuming. And I'm lucky in that way because he has graciously just stepped up and taken those roles and those duties on. And I don't think that's I don't think that's as common as what it could be. But it has been an opportunity for me um, to heal, as a result, and to to get through a part. And then sometimes too, to fall apart, and for him to be there, to still kind of hold me up, even though I'm kind of falling apart physically. And so I'm always encouraged when I see that dynamic happen, and a man not to be afraid because it's a womanly thing, to empty out the dishwasher or whatever, because it just goes such a long way, I think, to show love and just to make your spouse feel like, it's important that I realize and recognize that, you're maybe today you're just not able to do it. And I think that goes a long way. So that's what I would encourage your listeners or men that attend your boot camp, or, what's
And
it
base
called? Oh,
camp.
base camp.
Yeah.
And, is just to really, a man is a man, and there's a clear description of what that's supposed to be, just like there is of a woman in the Bible. But none of that speaks of what chores people have to do. And I think so often, and men and women both get just hung up on, well, that's not a guy thing, or that's not a husband thing, or a wife thing. And it's like, you know what? It's a household thing. And
I mean, even if you were single, you'd be doing it by
Yeah.
yourself anyway. So
but I think when we get married, then we're like, oh, that's yours, like taking out the trash. And I will admit, I don't like taking out the trash. But, there are just some times when one of you is struggling that you need to, the other person just needs to pick up those pieces. And so somehow, even though we had not been married for very long, as things began to unfold, and really, truly, our lives started falling apart in the eyes of probably most everybody else, God began to use those situations really to weave us closer together. And it was a struggle. It does not mean that we did not have rocky moments, and that the burden of all of that didn't create havoc. And there wasn't times that I used the D word, because that was easy. It's easy for me because I've been divorced, twice before. But he wouldn't let that happen. And then there were times when he would be crazy, or, having moments, and I wouldn't let, things happen. But it's just standing in the gap, I think, guarding your relationship, and then remembering too that when these things arise, when we tend to act out negatively or choose a negative route to try to get out of or out from underneath it, that's when Satan is picking at us and trying to break, our families apart. And so really, more importantly, I think it's just standing up, even if it means standing in the middle of your house and screaming for Satan to get his tiny out of there and to leave you alone. You know what I mean? It just one of you taking that lead, and then two, just I think there's nothing more respectful and honoring than for a man to truly be the head of the household, both spiritually and and then physically, in the sense of just leading the family and being prayerful. And I just think it's important, and it truly is what has kept us above water through all of this. I hope that answers your question.
So, excuse me. Looking back now, I think the faith that Grandma had and prayed over you guys instilled so much faith and belief, and even the grace that was to come later on in you and Anthony's and Uncle George, that if you look at us kids, me, Afton, and all of our cousins, and how much we've followed in Grandma's footsteps, and how much all of us have now, developed that relationship with Christ, do you think she's up there, singing and dancing and praising with Afton, or do you think she's like, struggling with us down here too, or?
Well, I believe, because the Bible tells us, there's no more tears and stuff in heaven, and no sorrow, and so I know Afton and your grandmother can't see the hardships. 'Cause I don't believe. You'd have to ask a Bible scholar, I guess, how truthful my statements are, but I don't believe God allows that to happen, because He doesn't allow them to be sad once they're there. Whether they get to play an integral part in what happens down here, in the sense that they do get glimpses. I don't know. And I guess we'll learn once we get there. What I do know, though, is the Bible talks about how generations will be affected by the things that we do. And I do believe that because I have seen it. I've seen it with my clients when I was working, whether it was poverty and, we hear so much about generation after generation, being caught up in poverty and welfare and that kind of thing. And that thing does happen. We do see that where grandma suffered and was on welfare, and then mom suffers and maybe she has a baby out of wedlock and then she's on welfare and so forth. I believe that too, though, and the Bible talks about that as far as the choices that we make and how we choose to live our lives will and can affect the generation after generation to come. Even the song that, was it Carrie Job, that talks about being blessed, your family being blessed, and she says, bless your generation and the next generation, generation. Is because I do believe it's like a trickle down kind of thing. If your grandmother, her mother, and her father were not Christians, they were Catholic, not even really devout Catholics, as they recall, more just because they were born into that faith, and I was originally born into that faith, and that's just what was expected. Is you went to mass and you did all the things that good Catholic people did, but they don't have a relationship with Christ. Their beliefs don't line up in the Bible, and it's just not the same thing. And so when your grandmother became a Christian and she truly accepted the Lord into her life and she gave him everything, and she spent all those years raising me and my brother and my sister, your aunt and uncle, and even though it was short, it was only 16 years for me, and 14 and 12, for my brother and my sister. Her choosing Christ had an impact on our lives, which then turned around and had an impact on yours, which will then turn around and have an impact on your children. Just like, your cousin Sarah, who's getting ready to have a baby. It is what now the fourth generation from, my mom down, that will be a direct link and a direct impact from the legacy that she left. And even though she endured such hardship and such turmoil with my dad, and even though my dad, we found out that he died back in 2018. We didn't know that he had passed away. We found it on Ancestry.com for all things. We don't know how he passed away. We don't know if he ever got his life right with Christ again. I don't know if we will ever know that, because I also don't know that I don't know how the Lord handles that either. As far as, will we know that he went to hell, because that still exists. And that's the thing I think that is different from my upbringing and your mom, grandma's upbringing and what have you, is fire and brimstone. It is a reality. And so, not to whitewash that out of the picture, like what, we've talked about before, because grace is grace, and what he did at the cross took care of everything for us. And there is no requirement but to accept him and to believe that he is who he is. And then, because we do that, then bringing him into our hearts, bringing him into our lives, makes us want to be better, makes us want to be more like him. And so then that becomes just a natural side effect of accepting him as Lord of our life. But the alternative is that if we never choose to do that and we never acknowledge him, there truly is a thing called hell, and there truly is a thing that will, an alternative. And it's not pretty.
Right.
So it's not that it didn't exist and that we were ever taught wrongly. It's just that that's not all there is. There's more to it than that. But I do believe, if my mama had, not met my dad, even as crazy and as mixed up and as sad as things turned out for them and turned out for him, if they had never met and he had never become a minister, we'd never come to Springfield, Missouri, and he'd never gone to CVC Bible School. I don't know, number one, if you would be here, And then number two, if we would all be, in this scenario and
Right.
being able to be fully aware of just how much the Lord has blessed us despite what has happened over the years.
And for me, looking back at everything now that I'm 32 and we've gone through all of this, uh, not to take anything away from dad's side of the family too, but grandma's faith, instilling all of that in you guys, and unfortunately, you guys had to struggle in your own ways and stuff like that. But her choosing that strong of faith and coming to Christ has now led to where my generation can break those family chains and break those addictions. And divorce isn't something Caitlin and I even talk about, let alone even say. So the fact that, unfortunately, it's taken me 32 years, and I don't mean this in a negative way by any means, but to realize that I'm not you and dad. So I don't have to, see my marriage as, all it's going to end up in is divorce. I don't let a porn addiction control my life anymore, or even need to be in the foreground or background of a thought, stuff like that. So hearing all of that and realizing that grandma had that foundation and instilling all that in there, so she struggled through all of that with grandpa. You guys had to struggle to where now I'm strong enough to be able to break those generational chains and stuff like that is really, really cool. So to know that you went through everything, to know it wasn't in vain, that way I can break those chains is really, really cool.
Well, and it, like you said at the very beginning of our previous one, you know, you would think that this many years later, that some of the things that you do or set into motion or prayers that you prayed, um, would end up in this here. And there were a lot of nights that I thought I'm not doing anything right. I'm not the best mom in the world. I've made some bad choices. I've been married twice before, and here I'm getting married for the third time. You know, did I expose my kids to the wrong things? And then realizing just how, maybe lopsided my faith was before really truly understanding grace and the power of the cross and all of that, and just all of those things where you question yourself and you think, oh, dear Lord, like, are we going to be at a place where we can look back and go, we lived a really good life and like God was blessed us and he was always there. And the crazy thing is, even at this point, I can look back and say, despite everything that's happened, despite having to figure out how to wash dishes at 16 and take care of myself and my brother and my sister and get ourselves to school, and then suffering through 2 divorces and breast cancer and losing a daughter, and now even being in renal failure and walking that journey out every day. The fact that I can sit here with my child and do this crazy podcast for all this time today, it's a blessing, and every single step was worth it. And now, even before I get to heaven, I can see the fabric that God has started to weave. And I remember saying probably 10, 15 years ago that it would be it would be grand when I could get to the place where I could see how God has woven through the things that I've had to experience, because it's been such a rough journey. And it was even before Afton passed, you know what I mean? I just used to think like, goodness gracious, like why has my life had to be like this exact way? When maybe on the outside I would look at other people and think, boy, they just had it easier. And here I am. I'm just 56. I still got, I hope, a whole lot of life left, because I'd really like a grandkid from Zach and Caitlin. But look back and I start to see that woven pattern and how each thing led to the other, and how we are where we are and who we are, and you're who you are because of how that has happened. And even now with, because I have grandchildren and they're in our lives a lot, and we were just with them last night, and I'm seeing a lot in Denver, who is our granddaughter, our youngest son's daughter. And we take her to church. And there is something with a child that is so different than with adults, but there's no fear. There's no fear, there's no hesitation, and there's nothing that clouds their vision. And so when she comes to church with us and she raises her hands and she closes her eyes and she's worshiping the Lord and she's 2 and she's feeling the Spirit and she's singing during worship music, um, it's hard to look at that and say there's no God. It's hard to look at that and believe anything else, because when a little baby like that can experience it and you see it and it's all over them and they're just feeling the Spirit that's flowing, um, it just reiterates the fact that it's worth it. It's worth it to just keep hanging on and to keep letting Him just guide us in the direction that we're headed. And so now she gets the benefit of the entire process. She gets the benefit of being in mine and Bob's home, her Papa and her Gigi's home, where we know what grace is now, and we know what the full meaning of the cross is. And we're not going to make her ever believe that there's, this protocol that she has to follow in order to be worthy of getting to heaven. She just has to love the Lord and ask Him to be part of her life. And so each aspect of that has, you know what I mean? Like that generation is already happening. And you got a better deal maybe than I did, but she's even getting a better one. And your kiddos will even be that much more blessed. And I don't know, that's a really big deal. And it's like coming full circle. And it just makes it worth it, because we just know that there's blessings there. And I don't know, until you've seen your grandkid like worshiping the Lord, I'm not sure that you can ever truly feel like pure joy or pure love. And that's all part of God's plan for us. That is what He intends for us to experience while we're here. So pretty cool.
And I think that that's a good mindset too, and you'll begin to understand as you get older. And it's not like me and Zach are that old, but we can sit back at 32 from 16, where, like we spoke on the first podcast, you think you know everything. So you get to this point in life where you realize that it's no longer cool for you to get everything. You get excited because your kids that you love, your granddaughter that you love, they're protected, they're safe. Like that's a blessing in its own too, that
It is.
you don't realize until Larry. It's Larry, ladies and gentlemen, special guest. Oh,
He was probably the one texting me, so but
But no, it's really cool. And but the other thing is too, and I think is so prevalent right now, and this will be the last thing I share, but whether you're 16 or you're 32, I think it's so important now, especially in the times that we are right now, to realize that there's not a lot of time left. When I was a youngster and they used to preach about God's returning and God's coming and what have you, it seemed very far away. It seemed like I got so much life to live and what have you. But we're seeing so much biblically play out right in front of us, and the Bible coming to life in the world that we live in right now more than ever before. And I just, I truly, truly feel like it's so important through your guys' ministry, whether it's the podcast or your base camp or all the different things that you guys are doing, outreach, or for your congregation, and just even the people that we meet daily. It's just we don't know when He's coming back, and I believe it's soon. I believe it's a lot sooner than ever before. And so the cool thing is, at 16, 32, 56, it doesn't even matter. He's here for each one of us at those ages, and He can be just as prevalent in someone's life that's 16, and He can use them just as much as He can use me at 56 or you guys at 32, or any of those things. And I think that's important for our teenagers to think too, that their lives are powerful and that He wants to use them too at that age. And He's got a plan for them too. They don't have to wait till they're 32 or till they finally figure it all out, because that's the cool part is He has it figured out. We just have to get in and accept Him and let Him guide us through. And that's something that people need to be mindful of. Is I don't know. I'm not sure how long He's going to continue lots of days I'd like for him to come back now. So, but
Well,
All right. So if that was the final, normally one of our final questions is anything that you had left to say that you felt led to say. So it sounds like that was one. Another thing that Zach has started that we always do, and I just want to say this while it's fresh, because you did mention the dialysis and stuff. Is there anything that the viewers could be praying for you over?
oh, sure, I'll always take prayer. Um, mainly just I'm kind of at the point now where I have done everything physically to put me in the best place possible, health wise, to get a new kidney. And so I've got one more kind of small hurdle that I have to, it's just an appointment, kind of a checkup thing, and then I'll be added to the transplant list. So dialysis is difficult. Anybody who's going through dialysis, while it is a vital thing that somebody in kidney failure needs in order basically just to stay alive, without it, I wouldn't be here. It is incredibly rough on the rest of our organs. It's not an easy process. For those who don't know, basically they, especially if you do hemodialysis like I do, they literally take your blood out of your body, clean it, and put it back in. And for me, it's through a port right above my heart, and so it puts a burden on my heart. It also does affect our brain and just the rest of our organs in our body. It's also physically draining. And so for a lot of people, they can't work. I'm not working any longer as a result because it's pretty taxing. So getting a kidney would be a miracle, and a blessing. And a lot of things have to line up in order for that to happen for me. And it happens for people every day. And I know God has a plan. It would be great if it would be sooner than later. But as we've been talking all day long, it's in His timing, and we'll see. But yeah, if they want to pray for me and my family, that would be a blessing for us. And hopefully that I get on that list here in probably about the next month, and we'll just see what God has planned after that.
all right. I think that's pretty much it, unless you want to
All
say
right,
anything
like
else.
I will. I'll be the one shutting the cameras and stuff off. So before I go, just another shout out to Base Camp. That will be next week. This
Uh,
time next week, we
be
will.
prepared because we are going mobile, so we'll be
Oh
down in base camp, and the podcast will be pretty much spamming YouTube and hopefully
We'll have
Spotify and
one on the
everything
way
else.
down
Yep,
Friday. Brett will be joining us in the vehicle, so that one's gonna be madness.
yep,
And then we'll have one once. We'll wait until we get settled in
yeah.
and kind of fire up
So we'll
one,
probably fire up the second one probably Saturday morning sometime maybe.
and then
And
we'll
then
have
we
the
got a
football
couple,
game.
yeah, we got a couple testimonies, and then we're going live during the football tournament as well. So we'll be spamming you guys like crazy next weekend.
Yep.
So.
And then tomorrow is Baptism Sunday. Rev, with I don't know, is he done with the Holy Spirit? Larry, is he done with the Holy Spirit?
One more.
So he may have one more. So
he may
Rev
have one
maybe
in the
Paul.
chamber
Yeah.
after this
So
week.
Rev will be finishing off the Holy Spirit, which that's been good. But service starts tomorrow at 9:00. Baptism Sunday again. For those of you that are watching live, if you want to be present for that, there will be. Clayton will actually get to baptize
His daughter,
Winnie,
yeah.
so that'll be cool. Youth showing out. Got two of the youth, Malachi and Elliot, will be getting baptized tomorrow. So I want to thank you. Ow, something just poked me in the leg. I don't know what it was. I want to thank you again for somebody who is going through dialysis and all of that stuff to give a free time, just the extra effort. To be here and just give your testimony. That's what this is all about. This has been so fun to do with Zach, and just knowing that there is somebody who's going to hear this. There is somebody who it may not listen to the full hour. There may be 30 minutes into it, and there's something that you said that just strikes them, and they're like, you know what? We needed that. We needed that today, and we're going to carry this on because we understand now all the side of the story, because I mean, there's a part in John where it talks about if they wrote down all the miracles and all the stuff that Jesus did, there wouldn't be enough books here on earth that would have the knowledge of it. And so to take the time to give a testimony of that, yeah, it may be 2 full episodes and you may only get one thing out of it for you, but it was something that you were meant to hear because you're going through a struggle. And so we appreciate you, opening up and giving that to a church of um, people that you don't know, a community that you don't know. And that's, like we said, that's what's cool about this is it's not just home church people. It's intended to be everybody give their testimony. So on a Saturday, on a free time, we greatly appreciate that. I want to thank you, and I will let Zach go ahead and finish off while I run over there.
Yeah, like Nathan said, we want to thank you again for you coming on. Initially thinking that it was probably going to be like 30 minutes, and here it is, almost three and a half,
Yeah.
4 hours later,
Okay.
probably. I haven't looked at the time, but again, thank you for being here with us. Thank you for believing in our ministry, and thank you for continuing the foundation that Grandma instilled in you and Anthony's and Uncle George. Your guys' struggles have not gone in vain and unnoticed. So it means a lot to me that it's continued down, and knowing that my kids will have a better life than you did, I did, and stuff like that. So it means a lot.
Keep that Jesus at the center.
But I love you. Nathan loves you. And thanks for being here again. Guys, thanks for watching. We love you, and as always, stay blessed.